Welcome to today's Bible study from College Lutheran Church and from me, Pastor David Drebus. We continue to study God's Word using this list of the top 100 essential Bible passages put together by the good Reverend Dr. Dave Delaney, Assistant to the Bishop of the Virginia Synod of the ELCA. Well, today we come to story number 27, the testing of Job. And we've selected 3 chapters from Job, chapters 1 through 2, and chapter 42. So there's a whole lot of material in between, of course. Job is a fascinating book. It's a poetic book. It's an exploration of really deep questions, troubling questions. Why do bad things happen to good people is one of the questions that's broached in this text. I'm reminded as I'm reading the first 2 chapters here, and these terrible things are happening to Job, I'm reminded of something Elie Wiesel said when he came to visit Mary Washington College in the town where I grew up. I got to go see this great writer, this survivor of the Holocaust, talk, and he brought up the book of Job. And I don't remember how he got to this topic, but I just remember him saying, you know, we read about all these awful things happening to Job, and we forget about Mrs. Job, and that everything bad that happened to Job also happened to her, and she's not mentioned a whole lot in the text. That's always stuck with me. Well, bad things do happen to Job, even though he is righteous, and that's a troubling thing for us to ponder, and it's explored in the book Job's Friends. If you read some of these additional chapters we've skipped, Job's friends try to give him pat answers, easy answers, and this is a book that rejects easy answers. Martin Luther had something to say about this in an introduction that he wrote to the book of Job. He wrote this in 1524. He said, "God alone is righteous, and yet one man is more righteous than another even before God. Job really is a righteous man. This book is written for our comfort, in order that we may know that God allows even his great saints to stumble, especially in adversity." Why would that be comforting? Well, that God allows even his great saints to stumble is comforting in a roundabout way, and we've explored this in some earlier Bible stories we've read, that just because something terrible is happening in your life, that doesn't mean your relationship with God is somehow askew or that you have done something especially wrong. Sometimes bad things just happen. Sometimes bad things are just part of being alive. Eventually, that's the answer that Job comes to. If you read chapter 42, he comes to the conclusion that he must yield before God, that he won't understand these things, that God is so over and above us that we won't understand. Job says this in chapter 42, "I know that you can do all things and that no purpose is beyond you. You ask, who is this obscuring counsel, yet lacking knowledge? But I have spoken of things which I have not understood, things too wonderful for me to know." What's interesting is, and then he says in verse 6, "Therefore I yield, repenting in dust and ashes." But in verse 5, Job says to God, "I knew of you then only by report, but now I see you with my own eyes." There is a sense here that his genuine questions to God, as troubling as they are, as angry as he is with God at points in this book, there's something about that honest engagement with God that has brought him into a real encounter with God. And so it's not by being pious and puffed up like Job's friends are that we get to know God, but through the course of this entire troubling book, Job has reached a point where he knows God more fully than he has before. Well, that's looking at the assigned chapters for today's Bible study. I wanted to look at chapter 10, though, because there's a very important part of Job's complaint that I want to bring up. He says in verse 4, and he's addressing God here, "Have you the eyes of flesh? Do you see as a mortal sees?" A teacher of mine once pointed to this verse and said this is a reasonable complaint from humankind to say to God, you don't know what it's like to live in this place where pain is possible, where we experience death. You don't know what it's like. This is a reasonable complaint to take to God, who's over and above all things. Except God answers Job's complaint through the birth of Jesus Christ, through the incarnation of the eternal Son of God in Jesus of Nazareth. God does come to know what it's like to stub your toe, to eat a good meal, to get sick after eating a bad meal, and eventually to die. God does answer Job's complaint. And in fact, my teacher back at Mary Washington College said that Jesus Christ is God saying to Job, oh, yes, I do too. I do too know what you're going through. So even if God doesn't answer Job's complaint within the pages of the book of Job, God does eventually answer this concern. God is no longer so separate from creation that God doesn't understand what it's like. God does understand what it's like to be you, to be me, to have all our ups and downs, because God came into the world through his Son, Jesus Christ. I think that's enough for today. I hope you'll spend time with this intriguing, troubling, wonderful book. Peace be with you.